Many great esports players have been labeled toxic, and no doubt they've had their moments. Everyone from Doublelift and S1mple to Imperial Hal and even FNS. And if you want to play like the pros, then you have to care about the game as much as these players do. In fact, we can see a similar level of competitiveness in top sports legends like Michael Jordan, who was also known for his intense toxicity towards his opponents. But such toxicity, while sometimes being connected to greatness, can also tear teams apart. Teams in both esports and traditional sports have been stacked up with tons of individual talent, yet can completely fall apart when that talent clashes and there's a toxic team environment. So this leads us to a question. Is competitiveness a key asset to be nurtured, or is it the very thing holding back most esports players? And if you aspire to play like Doublelift, S1mple, Imperial Hal, or FNS, then what can you learn from both their good sides and their bad?
I seen you get nervous, boy! I seen it! I seen it!
Is there some bad blood on this stage? A little bit of a rivalry between these two teams?
You should be aware that there's an AWP still up.
Oh, wow.
And Crims, yeah, he's really on the... At what point is that too much?
To the madness, but still.
And Waylander, this is where you need to get your emotions a little bit under control, mate.
It's easy to see a clip of a pro player being toxic and to instantly judge them. Of course, they shouldn't act like that. And of course, they should control their emotions. Of course, it isn't right to lash out at others. But if toxicity is such a limiting factor, then how is it that so many great players have a history of being toxic? And why do we seem to love toxic attitudes? In games like League of Legends, you have beloved streamers who stir up controversy with their toxicity, like Tyler1 or LS. And of course, this continues in other games like Counter-Strike with pro players like Nico and s1mple. And even in traditional sports with Kobe Bryant, Tiger Woods, and so on. The attitude of superiority coupled with a dominant level of skill is actually quite infectious and makes us wonder if adopting a sort of Gordon Ramsay level of intensity is actually necessary for becoming great. But why is being aggressive often so correlated with success? Well, think of the opposite. Think of someone who plays the game casually. They have a ton of fun while playing and they rarely get fazed by any losses. They don't care about what rank they are. Playing casually like this is great, but it's not actually very conducive for improvement. If you want to get good, you have to practice hard. You have to get motivated by your losses and you have to play to win. And that's just talking about getting good at the game. If you want to play the very top, you need to take this to a whole nother level. You need to make major sacrifices, push through dark times, and keep training even when you don't want to. And in these moments, when the good feelings of playing the game aren't there to motivate us, it's actually the dark ones that we have to rely on. The competitiveness of proving others wrong and the obsessiveness of needing that next win. In fact, Imperial Hal, as an example, even said that the reason for his heightened emotions is simply his competitiveness, the same competitiveness that drives him to play day in and day out.
I do not go to school. I literally, all I do, chat, is I wake up, do the morning routine, get on and play Apex.
So are toxic pros actually the anti-heroes of esports? Is toxicity actually their superpower? And if being a bit toxic is what it takes for you to become a master in your game, then wouldn't it be worth it? Well, let's consider when toxicity goes wrong. As I mentioned at the start of the video, toxicity destroys teams. In order for your team to succeed, they need to have a critical element, a sort of bonding glue called psychological safety. In a nutshell, psychological safety is the feeling that you can be open and honest and make mistakes without having to worry about being attacked by others on your team. With psychological safety, teammates can be constructive, offer fresh ideas, and learn together without fear. But with a dominant, toxic personality on the team, this aspect quickly disappears and the entire team will suffer because of it. So what's the balance here? When does competitiveness really turn into toxicity, and how can you find a way to manage both? Well, first I want to break down where exactly toxicity comes from and how the psychological factors underneath it can actually help you succeed, and even how it has helped hinder high-level esports players, perhaps even players that you currently look up to. Now, the intense emotions that lead to rage compilations and esports drama are really just wasted emotion. And that same emotional power that can ruin reputations could otherwise be harnessed and used to win more games. You can liken it to the Star Wars equivalent of using the dark side of the Force. But when used for good, this force can actually make you quite unstoppable. In fact, legendary basketball trainer Tim Grover explained that many of the greatest players he's worked with, like Dwayne Wade, Kobe Bryant, and Michael Jordan, were so dominant and competitive at the highest of levels because they embraced their dark side. But he also explains just how necessary tapping into this dark side can be. It's evil if you use it for excuses and to harm others, but otherwise, it's a power that can be used for good.
It's not an evil thing. It's an evil thing if you don't recognize it. It's an evil thing if you allow it to become destructive. It's an evil thing if you use it for excuses. But if you harness it, it takes you to places that you couldn't even imagine.
So, as a PSA to yourself and to all the pro players who sometimes waste their emotional power, I'd say begin by recognizing that what many label as toxicity actually comes from a good place, and be the first to admit to yourself that you aren't always the best at controlling it. But then consider the following 3 tips to gain greater control over your own mind. The first tip is to make training plans instead of excuses. Unless it's brutally clear that we messed up, we tend to find external things to blame for our failures, whether that's bad luck, bad weapons, or, dumb teammates. But as soon as you start to make those kind of excuses, you lose the opportunity to learn. So when things go wrong, catch yourself making excuses and dismiss them. Instead, take a hard look at what you could have done differently and start making practical training plans for how you can work on it during your next training session. Now, the second tip is to take extreme ownership. And this is a term borrowed from the ex-Navy SEAL Jocko Willink, and it entails taking ownership over absolutely everything. Not just your own performance and mistakes, but also ownership over your team's mistakes or seemingly unlucky situations. It's too easy to point fingers when your teammates clearly did something wrong. But most don't stop to think if they could have communicated better, prepared their teammates better, or done something different that wouldn't have led to that seemingly unlucky situation. So when things are clearly not your fault, still take ownership anyways, and ask yourself what you can do to better help your team or control the situation next time. And that leads us to the final tip. If you want to beat others, you need to focus on beating yourself. If you're not raising the bar for your own skills, deeply analyzing and training your weaknesses, and objectively measuring your performance for insights, then when the enemy wins, it's your own fault for letting them out-train you. So is competitiveness a good thing or a bad thing? And are seemingly toxic pro esports players holding back their own teams? Well, the answer to that lies in their own hands. Only their own self-awareness can save them from tearing their teams apart, and only their attempts at self-improvement can allow them to harness that toxicity and actually use it to propel their teams forward. As leaders within their own training and their own teams, it's up to them if they want to take ownership or keep making excuses. And the same applies to you. If you want to become great at your game of choice, then you have to lean into your competitiveness. But of course, you have to also put in a lot of effort to take control of it and use it as a tool to get you to the top. Now, If you're sick of getting hard stuck and you want to use science to get an advantage over other players, then I highly recommend the Esports Elite course. It's a complete roadmap of science-based improvement tactics that will allow you to reach the top 1% of players in record time. Of course, all of it is science-based, with a lot of ideas that most others in esports, even many pros and their coaches, don't even know about. The 66-day challenge, where you'll put everything into practice and improve at record speeds. So join the course with the link in the description and see how much you can improve in 66 days. And with that said, I hope you guys absolutely loved the video. I hope you keep on grinding and keep on improving, and I'll see you all in the next video.